The Longines Spirit Zulu Time. This watch retails for £2,850 sterling or $3,780 at current exchange rates, excluding any tariffs of course. That's a full £1,000 less than the Tudor Black Bay or Braemont Supermarine GMT variants, which I consider to be the viable alternatives. It's also £1,000 cheaper than the gold version, which has a smattering of gold on it but is otherwise identical. So, firstly, this is a superb watch and great value. It has also been a big success for Longines, and I had to wait to get hold of this green anthracite variant, such was the demand. It was also available in blue and black. Secondly, why Zulu time? Well, it's a bit of a story. Having long established that due to the rotation of the Earth, when it's noon in London, it's quite often still dark in America, the concept of time zones came into being. Incidentally, if you believe the Earth is flat, you can now substitute in whatever bonkers theory you use to explain that. In fact, within the UK, using the sun as a timekeeper and setting noon accordingly, local time zones had long existed. Travelling on foot or by horse, and with watches a rarity, the fact that church clocks in Bristol were 11 minutes behind those in London made no difference. All that changed with the coming of the railways in 1841, when it definitely did make a difference. Trying to schedule trains to numerous local times along line of route was nigh on impossible. Soon standardised London time was adopted across the whole country, although the clock at the Bristol Corn Exchange still shows the local time to this day. When I say London time, I mean Greenwich time, that being the site of the Royal Naval Headquarters and, more significantly, the Royal Observatory, where the world's best horologists, such as John Harrison, had plied their trade whilst trying to solve the problem of calculating longitude. Incidentally, if you ever get the opportunity, do watch the superb film about this with Michael Gambon and Jeremy Irons. Cut to 1884, and US President Arthur hosts a conference to sort out the world's time zones and set a prime meridian. That is a noon to which all the other time zones will be compared. The British, at that time the world's superpower, politely insisted that it should be Greenwich, and so we have Greenwich Mean Time. The world's time zones were then built around this, earlier to the east, later to the west. It also became the boundary between the eastern and western hemispheres. In theory, the time zones would be along straight lines, but over time nations have changed their times to coincide with friendly neighbours or trading partners, or just to make life easier. So we've ended up with a bit of a jumble, but still observing the basic principle. Still with me? Good. Cut forward again to air travel, when we are suddenly able to cross time zones quickly rather than at the leisurely pace of ocean liners, as illustrated in this exact scale model. Pilots needed a system whereby they knew what time it was, not where they were, nor even where they had been, but as a standard. If you set off from Japan and fly to Los Angeles, according to local time you will be landing about 10 hours before you took off, and therefore not due a break. This was sorted with the adoption of Universal Central Time, UTC, which still utilised Greenwich but was set from midnight in Greenwich as opposed to noon, and using the 24-hour clock. Pilots therefore all use UTC for scheduling and shift patterns, which makes sense. So, GMT is a time zone, whereas UTC is an actual time, which is the same no matter where you are. Incidentally, why UTC rather than UCT? Blame the French for arguing about it. Okay, nearly there. Zulu. No, not the film, although excellent. Not the warrior either. Zulu is the word assigned to the letter Z, or Z, in the phonetic alphabet. Early radio transmissions were often unreliable at best, and lots of letters sounded the same over the air. Listen to this commentary of the Jack Dempsey versus Gene Tunney fight, for example.
Gene came with his left, followed up with a right came, but doesn't come through.
To get around this, each letter was assigned a word, and no two words sounded similar. For example, M and N sound very similar and could easily be confused, but Mike and November don't and aren't. UTC was designed Z-time for pilots, for zero as in zero meridian, and therefore quickly became Zulu time. Hooray! Longines, always rich in aviation heritage, produced its first Zulu time watch in 1925, and they had obviously rummaged through the old photo albums when putting together the recent Spirit range. Next, there are true GMT watches and Traveller's GMT watches. This is a true GMT. Notice how quickly we head back to Greenwich here. This means that you can set the GMT hand to Greenwich time or Zulu time and the regular hour hand to local time. The thing about this type of watch is that you don't have to stop it to do this. The function of the GMT watch is that you can move the hour hand independently of the minutes and seconds. The date is also a function of this movement and will change accordingly, reverting to yesterday's date if you're on a long eastward flight across the Pacific and the international dateline. But the GMT/UTC hand remains where it is, so your pilots or travellers know what time it is, either as UTC or simply in their hometown as they prefer. This time is read off the outer bezel. I usually keep my watch at UTC, meaning it coincides with local time here in the UK during the winter, but is 1 hour behind during summer months due to daylight saving. This is actually just laziness on my part, as it's far easier to make the adjustment to the hour hand than stop the watch and reset it when the clocks change. However, I will now simulate a flight to New York. New York is 5 hours behind us, so as we come into land, I move the hour hand back 5 hours. The GMT hand remains where it is, so I know the time back home or UTC time as I prefer. All this is done on the first click of the crown, which is usually reserved for altering the date. Given that the GMT hand alters the date, both backwards and forwards, the ability to alter the date separately has to be sacrificed. That can be a bit of a bind if you decide to wear the thing and realise that the date is 15 days adrift. The bezel also rotates in both directions, with a satisfying click every hour indicated. If you're handy at mental arithmetic, you can use this feature to indicate a third time zone or help with calculations about the time in, say, Tokyo. The watch itself has a 42mm case, a 48mm lug-to-lug, and a height of 13mm. This makes it slimmer than the Black Bay and the Braymont. It also has a ceramic bezel rather than an aluminium one, which is still used by many brands, including Rolex. The ceramic is absolutely lovely and has the added advantage of being really difficult to scratch, unlike aluminium. It also has a loomed marker to indicate the midnight position. The stainless steel case has a brushed finish but with polished shoulders which look lovely. As stated, there are a number of colours available, but for me this was the only choice. The green bezel, brown leather and anthracite face perfectly complement the gilded hands. There is a gold version which has a gold crown and bezel edge, but it loses the green and I think I prefer this one. Certainly I wouldn't want to pay an extra £1,000 for the 3 grams of gold or whatever it took to produce that watch. The display is gloriously clear, and like its near relative, the Spirit chronograph, the hands and Arabic numerals are filled with superluminova. In fact, if you wear a watch in bed, this is the one to wear. The clarity at night is going to be hard to beat. The dial has the exquisite cutouts for the hour indices, and the date window is at the symmetrical 6 o'clock position. This is all covered with a domed sapphire crystal, which lines up perfectly with a slightly tapered bezel. Everything about the watch face is spot on. The strap width is 22mm, but I wouldn't be for swapping it anyway, despite Longines making it easy to do so with this quick release mechanism. Why not? Because the strap really suits the watch, and it has the added feature of a micro adjust built in. Finally, it is super comfortable, which is a quality not to be overlooked. There is the standard 100 meters water resistance thanks to the screw down crown, but again this is not a watch for the pool unless you are a Philistine and opt for the bracelet instead. The movement is the Longines exclusive L844.4, which of course is made by ETA. It is slowed down from the traditional 28,800 vibrations per hour to a more leisurely 25,200 or 3.5 Hz for the physicists amongst you. Presumably this is to extend the power reserve in the mainspring, which is an impressive 70 plus hours. Speaking of springs, the balance spring is anti-magnetic silicon rather than steel. It is COSC certified to the usual -4 plus 6 seconds per day, and I should also mention the 5-year warranty. My local dealer has already pointed out that it is increased from the 2 years I alluded to in my review of the Spirit chronograph. Longines exclusive movement sounds halfway to in-house. Sadly, Longines haven't made their own movement since 1987, but of course it isn't. The sibling Conquest GMT uses the remarkably similar L844.5, and I certainly don't anticipate the Swatch Group building a new movement from the ground up for, say, Omega or Baumer Mercier in the event that they want to add a new GMT to their lineup. This is the 42mm version. To capitalise on the recent fashion for slightly smaller watches, Longines have brought out a 39mm version, which is, of course, more expensive. In fact, now we're a few years into availability, you can get a green anthracite model like this for less than $2,200 if you shop around on the internet. And it is very difficult not to consider that an absolute bargain, given the quality of the watch you get for it.